Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Glendale College, and welcome to our biannual business lecture series. You may be asking yourselves today why you are here, or what's important. Why should I listen to this wonderful team of people? What can they teach me? What's in it for me? And what I want to tell you is that there is a lot of information that you will find valuable for you today. We gave you a notepad and we gave you a pen, so I hope that you will take notes because today may be the day that will change your life in so many different ways. So let's get started. My name is Rafael Cardona, and I am an instructor of business and marketing here at the college. Thank you. You know, throughout my career, a professional career, which spans about 30 years, I spent half of my time working in international business, dealing with countries like Canada and Mexico. And the experience enriched my life not only professionally, but personally. When you get to learn the world, to see it differently, to learn to see the world through the eyes of other people, to learn to negotiate in ways that you have never seen before, it's really eye-opening. So, what's in it for you? Why is global business important, you may ask yourselves? Well, with the advent of technology, we see that negotiations happen faster, that transportation of goods and services can happen a lot faster than ever before, than in my generation. Why else? Why is it important for you? As I look around the room, and I have been teaching here for 8 years now, I know that many of you are multicultural. You speak languages, you are able to navigate other cultures, and you can use that as an asset for you as you develop your professional careers. So I encourage you to think about your future in that respect. Many of you have already chosen a major, and that's wonderful, but perhaps today and what you're going to learn may help you focus more on what it is that you want to do as a focus. But if you are like me, when I was a student here 25, 30 years ago and ran around not really knowing what I was going to major in, today may be the day that will change your lives. So, before we introduce our wonderful panel and our sponsors, I want to give you some statistics that will open up your eyes and really get you warmed up about what's about to happen today. I think we all know that California is placed 6th in the world as a top economy. So we're very lucky to be here to be able to produce and be part of this GDP production system. But did you know that about 95% of consumers in more than 225 countries buy goods and services from California? Or did you know that about 80% of global GDP growth is projected to happen outside of the US between 2013 and 2018? So those are numbers that will help you put things in perspective. But what's in it for you? Employment opportunities. What does this really mean if you embark yourselves in pursuing a degree in global business? Well, I can tell you that over the next 5 years, more than 22,000 jobs will open, that will be created in global business. I can also tell you that about 70,000 people will retire from global business, and the replacements for those people need to be found. So that could be you. So think about those numbers. Think about what I just shared with you. And as you listen to our wonderful panel, see if you can put a story together in your mind and get some motivation to change the course of your career or make it better. And before I introduce our speakers, I'd like to bring up to the stage 2 teams of people, or 2 individuals, 3 people really, that matter a great deal because they're our sponsors. In addition to LinkedIn, who's here today on the panel, we have GTL, Global Trade and Logistics Consortium. And I'd like to ask Brandon Shamim to come up to the stage and share with us a few minutes about what GTL is.
I'm going to take the liberty, folks, of coming a little bit closer. So, show of hands, folks. Who here enjoys any of the following? Food, fashion, entertainment, technology. Terrific, folks. Congratulations. I think you are in the right space at the right time. Right? The reality is all of the things that I shared with you, which are part of our lives, are directly and indirectly connected to global business, trade, supply chain, and logistics. Right? And I think that the speakers and presenters today will hopefully impart some opportunities for you to really lean into why that conversation is important. And we really want to commend Rafael for really creating this opportunity for all of us. I think, there's a lot of people that bring these events together, and I think it's really, really a wonderful opportunity to have this event. But I think that it's really the vision and design of instructor Rafael Cardona. So let's give Rafael another round of applause, folks. So real briefly, since we're spreading love, let me ingratiate myself. This is a bit of a homecoming. I had the proud privilege of being an instructor here for a number of semesters teaching entrepreneurship. It's great to see just a few folks in the room that I do recognize. But today in the capacity, I wanted you to know that I bring you greetings from the region, and you're wondering, what the heck is the region, right? So the region, folks, is really Southern California, this large grouping. There are 12 colleges, literally from LA to Orange County, South Bay, the San Fernando Valley, San Gabriel Valley, where we are, that represent 12 different colleges that represent this broad conversation that we're having in the region to be able to create opportunities for partnership with our friends in private business, hence here, right? And really create an opportunity for all of you to have more meaningful classroom discussions, curriculum that is designed to give you the skills and the training to be competitive day one in the growing field of global business and trade. And for those of you, Rafael shared some great statistics, but this is one that is really meaningful for hopefully all of you, right? I suspect you're all job seekers if you're not already in the, working in a career, towards a career, right? 1 out of every 8 jobs in Southern California is directly or indirectly related to global business, trade, and logistics. Let me say that one more time. 1 out of every 8 jobs. Right? So I suspect that all of you, whether you know it or not, are going to be seeking an opportunity in this space. So why not give yourself every advantage you possibly can to take what you're learning in the classroom and be able to translate it in a way that allows you to be a candidate for any one of these companies that are represented here, and many more that are not, but I would find the skills and the native knowledge that you have to be able to create a pathway of success in your life. So that's part of the reason why I'm here in support not only of this wonderful program and event, but really to be able to quite selfishly get a preview in the next generation of leadership within the region, within global business and trade. So thank you guys for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Brandon. That was great. Great information. The other sponsor that is here is our Life Club. Life Club is an entrepreneurial club that started here 3-4 years ago and is looking to grow. And I'd like to call the co-president and president of the club to come up to the stage and talk to our students about the Life Club.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm going to take the liberty as well to walk around. I will leave the message for Life Club for Katya to speak to you guys about. I have a different message, and before that, I want to thank all of you here for coming. It's such an honor to see each and every one of you. It is. And because of that, I want to share a personal story with every one of you. I come from a family which is not very rich. I come from Malaysia, and being young, when I was young, I wanted to do a lot of things. I had all these huge ideas where I want to accomplish. I want to be an actor. I want to be an actor on the big screens. I want to be a model. I want to come to the States. I want to start my own business. And coming from my family situation, it's going to be tough. But because I had that idea and I had that spark in me, I persevered and I made all those things happen. That's how I can stand on this stage right now and speak to each and every one of you. With that message out there, I want to bring the point up. The point about that is to take action on whatever inspiration that you guys get from today, whether it's in this event, whether it's from one of the panelists, whether it's from what I said, or whether like what's going to happen in the next minute. But if you have an inspiration, a spark, it happened for a reason, grasp on it, persevere, and it's going to happen. So with that said, I want to pass the stage to the wonderful Katya to talk to you guys about the Life Club.
Lean In for Entrepreneurship is a place where students can come together, work together, and create together. If you want to start your own company but you lack the creativity, or you have the creativity but you lack the idea, this is the club for you. The purpose of our club is to bring students who come from different backgrounds and with different talents together to network and to create products and services that will grow locally and globally. We also bring in guest speakers to our club meetings, just like we're doing today at the Business Lecture Series. If any of what I'm saying is interesting to you, please contact me or Justin. You can find us on Instagram. Our handle is LifeGCC. Our website is lifegcc.club, or you can find us on the ASGCC website. We meet on Mondays from 4 to 6 p.m. in the Sandbox, 3rd floor of the San Rafael building. Thank you for coming today, and please enjoy the event.
It is so encouraging for me to see students live the dream that I went and made possible for myself. 30 years ago, I was in their seat. So thank you, Katya, and thank you, Jay. So now allow me to introduce the wonderful panelists that are joining us here today. I will ask you to please hold the applause until I have introduced all four. Thank you for that. So I will start the introductions with William Hernandez, sitting immediately to your right, to my left. Professor Hernandez is an executive director of the Center for Global Leadership at UC Irvine, the Paul Moraes School of Business, where I graduated with an MBA 10 years ago. He holds a JD degree from Georgetown University and a degree in Spanish also, as well as a BA in political science from UCI. He consults in the areas of international management, international business development, international negotiations, and organizational development. And over the course of the last 21 years, he has worked with companies of the caliber of DuPont, Walmart, Boeing, Banco Santander, Micro H International, McDonnell Douglas, and countless others. His projects range from highly sensitive international transactional negotiations that involve multi-billion dollars. Hernandez designs and implements turnkey international divisions for companies seeking to expand internationally. And the areas that he covers specifically, which I think I teach in my 101 and my 10 and 162 classes, are areas that, if you've had my class, you'll know. Strategic alliances, joint ventures, international team development, and expansion strategy. Additionally, Professor Hernandez is on the board of directors of various international and charitable organizations. He has led various trade delegations in California and abroad, including Spain, Italy, Korea, Argentina, and Japan. And these efforts have resulted in ongoing trade business relations. And on a very personal note, I want to share with you that I consider Professor Hernandez a friend and a mentor and a colleague, and has given me opportunities that very few people have done, and for that I'll be forever grateful, and that's why he's here, to support me and to support you as well. So thank you for that, William. Our next speaker is Paul Bokota, sitting on your far right. And Mr. Bokota is Vice President and Division General Counsel at Hardware Home Improvement Division, HHI, which is part of Spectrum Brands based in Lake Forest, California. He holds a BA degree from Harvard University in government and a JD from Indiana University School of Law. Paul's career spans 26 years, practicing as an attorney, both in-house and for law firms in Orange County, and has worked with many companies, including Toshiba, James Hardie Building Products, and Anderson Consulting, among others. He has also served as judicial clerk with the United States District Court System. Throughout his career, Paul has managed legal departments of multinational companies, including all transactional and commercial litigation matters. He oversees attorneys as well, and he deals with businesses both in Europe and throughout Latin America. In his current job, his responsibilities include directing HHI Business Decision as a lead team member, and he oversees areas such as all legal issues, including transactional, litigation, employment, antitrust, securities, warranty, marketing, and multiple others. So that is Paul. And our next speaker is Ariella Roberts, sitting to your right next to Paul. And she is currently director partnerships planning for the partnership marketing and creative team at Disney Channels Worldwide. She holds a degree from USC, BA in Public Relations, and a minor certificate in Cinema and Television. Previous to her current role, Ariella served as Director of Franchise Management for Disney Junior Preschool Brands. And before becoming a Disney cast member herself, Ariella was the Director of Worldwide Marketing at Warner Brothers in consumer products. Ariella also held positions at East West Marketing, where she oversaw projects for Universal, and Paramount Pictures, where she began her career in entertainment. And she's also a former DJ.
That's right.
That sounds like fun. 10 years, I hear. And last but not least, all the way from San Francisco, Meg Callahan with LinkedIn. She's Customer Success Manager at LinkedIn. She holds a BA degree from University of California, Santa Barbara in Psychology and Global Studies. Meg has over 5 years of experience helping schools, colleges, universities to prepare students for the future. And that is the reason why she is here. And I think you're all very fortunate that she is here to show you a few pieces of information that will make a difference in your life. For the last 3 years, she has been part of the LinkedIn Learning Higher Education team. And in her current role, she supports schools that provide training and resources at no cost to students. She helps these schools translate their students' learning needs into tangible goals. And Meg is very excited to be here today, and so am I. So can we please give them a round of applause for being here? So I have so many questions, and last night I struggled trying to narrow these down. They're all important, but I'm going to try to paint a story for you. And the way we're going to do this is I'm going to ask Professor Hernandez to paint a picture of what global business has been and how it has evolved over the last few years and how we got to where we are. And then Paul and Ariella will paint through their experience in the corporate world. What kind of positions are available for you to consider if you pursue a career in international business? And then, of course, Meg will introduce you to the LinkedIn Learning Initiative that we're launching here today. So, William, I would like to begin with you and ask you the very first question for today, and that is to share with us, you know, humanity has evolved through many industrial revolutions, right? We had the steam engine, and then we had the age of science and mass production, and now we have the Industry 4, which is all about technology. Robotics, artificial intelligence, the internet, industrial internet, things like that, smart factories. So could you share with us in the audience how we have come about to evolve into such an exciting place in history with international business and global business?
If I may, let me begin by having you focus on a word that Rafael just said when he began to put my participation within context. And the first word that came from his mouth was humanities. I want to begin by perhaps articulating a somewhat different context. International work or global work does not exist. There, let's begin with that context. International work does not exist. There is only interpersonal work done internationally. And it's within that context that that word humanities perhaps has its most relevance. International work is the product of essentially three factors, and those three drivers are the ones that probably all of you have heard. One is the mobility of labor, one is the mobility of capital, and the other one is the transference of technology. And what has happened, as Rafael has most certainly said, is that that has been generated because of the advent of technology, the ability to move across countries, and within that context is where it's at. I ask you to consider that within the role. Capital, and if we look at one of the drivers of the mobility of capital, seeks to find its most efficient expression, the highest return on its investment. And so what will happen is that capital will go anywhere as long as it's been able to attract a higher return on that investment or a higher return on the equity. If we look at it from the mobility of labor, labor will similarly look for and attract whatever is its most efficient expression. So for example, if someone's willing to work for less than you're willing to work here in the United States, labor will then go to wherever that is in the world, and that's what global capitalism has facilitated. And then what happens from that point on is if labor cannot go abroad, like for example, the bus boy or the plumber or something that has to be done, labor will still continue to find its most efficient expression, and in that turn what happens is that begins to create the dynamics that we see that we call now migration. Whether that migration happens to be for economic reasons or political reasons becomes part of that driver. But the one that I really wanted to perhaps have you focus on is that what we call the transference of knowledge and the mobility of knowledge or information and the role that that plays. As international business begins to begins to acquire more semblance of normality, what happens is that that knowledge is going to have to manifest itself so that at some point those relationships that we spoke about at the beginning are going to have to be manifested. So along those lines, it drives a certain underlying force. Hopefully we'll get a little bit more time to elaborate on.
Thank you, William. So that leads me to asking now Paul and Ariella questions regarding to these relationships, William, that you're talking about, that are more personal now than they are international, because nowadays we can easily do business with someone across the globe, and there's no internationalization other than a relationship between two people. And so what I'd like to ask Paul is, in reading, Paul, your professional, brilliant achievements, I learned about some of the areas that you have worked in and managed. And some of these, I'll read them to you. You have been involved in international marketing, in supply chain, international accounting and taxation, logistics and operations, international economics, management analyst, and the list goes on and on. I was hoping that maybe you could paint for us examples, maybe one or two, of some of these positions. What is a day-to-day life for someone working in international marketing or in supply chain?
Great. Well, thank you. Can everyone hear? And I also like to thank the Dean and Rafael for the invitation. It's always a pleasure and honor to come speak with people, so thank you for having me. As Rafael mentioned, on a daily basis, we're a global company, about $5 billion. We both manufacture and sell throughout the world, have facilities all in different parts of the world. So all of these jobs, in terms of international jobs, I come in contact with daily. So people, even if you live in California, you may be running a marketing campaign for a product that is being sold in Latin America or somewhere in Asia. If you are a supply chain person, so supply chain is never considered the sexy stuff, but it actually is, someone actually has to get a product from a factory in China to a store in New York or in Boston. And how it gets over the ocean and then over land in the United States is a complex process. And so we have people in our office here in California who are responsible for global supply chain management. So they will frequently be in Asia or other parts of the world where we have suppliers, and they will work with those people to find the right types of suppliers, to qualify those suppliers, to make sure that they're getting you product that meets the standards that you need. And they will then work with logistics companies, actually shipping companies, freight forwarders, people who then can take those products and actually put them on a boat and then cross the ocean. They have to land here, usually in Long Beach. Then we work with customs people, import-export people, who then have to make sure that it can clear customs and tell us, are there going to be duties, are there going to be tariffs, what is this going to cost? So all of these things are jobs that are very available in California. They're available all over the world because they're necessary all over the world. But from logistics, supplying, marketing, people who manage human resources and manage employees in different parts of the world, all of that is part of international business, and it's something that can be done from anywhere in the United States or obviously, again, in other parts of the world. But those are some of the typical jobs that a large manufacturer like my company will see. And William mentioned the interpersonal part. It is very true. I mean, I will sometimes fly to Asia, and sometimes I have legal stuff there, or sometimes I just pretend I have legal stuff there to justify the trip. But often I go just to meet people, and there is a lot to be said for simply face to a name or meeting people. In all cultures, it's important. In certain cultures, this is a diverse, multicultural group. In some cultures, that human relationship and having an interpersonal relationship with people is even more important than it is in the United States. And so I actually will travel to Asia or to different parts of Latin America simply to meet people with whom I have regular contact. So don't, even in the age of technology and all of that, do not minimize, and this isn't just old folks saying this, and I've become that old guy who now talks like the old guy, but this is not just that. It is still critical to maintain those relationships and develop those relationships. But for those of you thinking about careers, and we'll go through maybe later on some of the lists of those, there are numerous jobs that involve international skills that you could enter.
Thank you, Paul. Well, my next question is also for you, and it's regarding that. What resources are there that you could list for our students that they can take note of today? Any websites, organizations that you can share with us that our students can look into?
Sure. So I feel obligated to simply say LinkedIn, and that if I say anything else, that would not be politically correct. So I will start with LinkedIn because I do not want to get hit by Meg. But actually, LinkedIn is a great, and it's not just a plug for them because she's paying me a lot of money, but it is a great resource, both in terms of actually connecting with people, or if you see companies in whom you have an interest and you look to see on LinkedIn whether they have positions, there is actually obviously a spot on LinkedIn where you can look at jobs and put in what career, what area you're looking at, both geographically and functionally. So LinkedIn is a great place to start. There's a site called Indeed.com, Indeed.com, which is what's called an aggregator. So Indeed, a company called Simply Hired, or a website called Simply Hired, aggregate postings from various other sources and put them into one place. Mm-hmm. There's a site I haven't used as much, but I've seen people use it, called Going Global. So it's GoinGlobal. The G serves for both words. So there are websites that have listings and postings. There may be recruiters in areas where you're particularly interested in banking or accounting or human resource. So those are kind of general sites that you can go on to look first. But the other thing to do is if you have an industry in which you're interested, or if you have a company in which you're interested, all companies now post their positions online. So it's also very helpful if you have 5-10 companies you're interested in. You can look at them through LinkedIn, or you can actually go to those sites as well and look at their postings, because they may have information that has not been aggregated, or they may have information on their websites that is in more detail than would exist on an aggregated site. So you can start with those general sites, those general aggregated sites, but I would also encourage you to look at specific companies and their websites for postings as well. If there are recruiting companies that specialize in recruiting engineers or accountants or lawyers, and so we can help you find those as well. If there's an area, a functional area in which you have a particular interest, there are recruiters who specialize in finding people in those industries as well. So lots of resources available. Obviously, it does require work, it does require time, and then ultimately you do need to contact people because, as William said, people hire you. The mythical company does not hire you. Actually, a person will hire you. So it does require going to lunch, informational interviews, calls, emails. It does require a lot of persistence, but those are some good places to start.
Thank you, Paul. Those are wonderful resources that our students can use. I would like to speak to Ariella now and ask questions of you. Like you, I spent almost 10 years working for an entertainment conglomerate, Viacom, which, as you know, owns MTV and Paramount and CBS TV and so on and so forth. And recently, in reading the news, I read about the new acquisition of Disney and Fox, the new integration of these two huge corporations. And it reminded me of my days at Viacom, my days there when they broke the company into two. I would like to ask you if you could share with us today what this kind of integration means for global business.
Everyone thinks Hollywood is Hollywood, right? But it truly is a global business, if not one of the largest global businesses in entertainment. And the Fox-Disney deal, that's a $73 billion acquisition and merger. And you can imagine that in order to get there, there's lots of people behind the scenes, from analysts, financial planners, bankers, and then even in each of the countries, all of the approval committees. I don't know if you follow the news, but just yesterday, the EU antitrust regulators just approved the acquisition. So even when this was announced earlier this year, that set into motion it wasn't official, right? Set into motion a whole slew of regulatory committees. In each country, every antitrust committee has to approve the merger. The EU one that happened yesterday, by far one of the biggest wins. But every single country has to approve it. That means there's these interpersonal relationships happening for big business mergers like this in every country. And there are folks that are involved in that and play a big role. Just in June, there were global bankers from Goldman Sachs and from JP Morgan from the Fox and the Disney side that met all over the world, basically, to figure out all of the financial plans to integrate in each of the countries. So I found out very quickly that a role in marketing in Hollywood is truly a global role, because you have to sort of know that and understand the landscape very quickly. Just a fun little story, because I thought of it just now that you guys would like this. But I was at Warner Brothers for 9 years before I came to Disney, managing all of the animation brands. And big companies, corporate organizations, we have reorgs pretty much every year, if not couple times a year, but you just come to expect a reorg. So the job you might be doing today might not necessarily be the job that you're doing in a year from now, but hopefully you'll have the skills acquired to transfer that. And we lost in a reorg our entire regional marketing team, meaning all of these teams that managed marketing for Asia Pac, for Latin America, and for the European countries. Basically, their positions were eliminated, and I was told overnight that I was now the global marketing director. And I really had no idea what that meant, but quickly I was asked to do a business analysis for Tom and Jerry in India. Because apparently Tom and Jerry is one of the largest franchises and animation brands in India, and it's a huge revenue driver for the company. So quickly, all the knowledge I had in college and everything that I had learned from my career path ahead of time did not prepare me for doing marketing for Tom and Jerry in India, and I had to very nimbly and quickly sort of flex to be able to figure out what those nuances were, working interpersonally with local partners that could tell me more about the market and about the industry. About what I found out was that real estate development was very big, so there were different marketing opportunities in that territory than I even knew existed in the U.S. So just a little fun story that you always have to be prepared in this global world that you are going to probably fill a role that you might start in, that you're not going to finish in, but you always are going to be asked to sort of be nimble and flex and have this knowledge of different territories in the world.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. What resources, if our students are interested in pursuing a career in entertainment, which, I was there, 25 years ago, that's what I wanted to pursue. What resources are there that you can share with us?
It's funny because now I work for this little company out there called Disney, and people come up to me all the time and say, I want to work at Disney. And I say, well, what do you want to do? And they say, I don't know. Tell me what there is. That is not how it works, folks. Let me just tell you that. One of the biggest pieces of advice that I can tell you, and I love Justin's story from the Life Club, thank you for sharing your story, is find your spark and find your passion. You have to know what you're good at and what you are trying to accomplish. One of my first questions for those people approaching me is, well, did you look on the website to see what jobs are offered? And usually they're like, oh no, I should probably start there. Yes, you need to do your research. Resources like LinkedIn, like Indeed, can help you network and figure out what specific people are doing in those roles. And then the various companies on all of their sites, DisneyCareers.com, WBCareers.com, will have all of the specifics of those roles. So if you can do your research and figure out what it is that you want to do, then you can sort of figure out what role is best for you, because you're not just going to go to a recruiter and say, what do you got for me? That's just not how it works. But definitely do your research, and I love LinkedIn. I was an early adopter. I've been on LinkedIn forever. One of my other pieces of advice, which doesn't really go with the question, but I'm going to say it anyway.
That's fine.
I recently hired for a coordinator on my team, and I had 2,700 applicants for one coordinator position on my team. And I'm not the recruiter. I don't work in human resources, but I am the hiring manager. I'm the final decision maker. And I wanted to know more about how it works, because I wasn't going to meet 2,700 people. That's, the HR's job is to filter them. And they went in to sort of describe to me how they work with software and bots and keyword filters. And they're only seeing a very small percentage of those applicants to even present to me as the hiring manager. So my tip is, one resume does not fit all. If there is a job that you see that you really feel like you have specific skills for and you really want to go for it, you need to customize your resume to make sure that you are hitting on all of those specifics that the role requires and that the hiring managers are looking for, so that you can even get through those filters. Because some people think, oh, if I can just get into that interview, they're going to love me. I'm so great at interviews. Well, I got news for you. You might not even get there because you're being filtered by the software programs. And, and then I only interviewed 20 people from that. So.
Right, so that's the time when our students need to carefully review the job description and look at those buzzwords, right, those keywords, and make sure that those are either on your cover letter or on your resume, so that you don't get kicked out of the system, as Ariella is explaining. Very good. Well, I would like to, before we go to Meg, I'd like to quickly jump back to William and ask you, William, so based on all these wonderful job descriptions that we just heard, obviously education plays a very important role. Right, the level of education that our students are able to acquire. At this institution, we offer a 2-year degree, which is a certification in international business or global business. With that much education, how much can they achieve in terms of getting a job similar to what our guest described? And if not enough, what is the next step? How do we achieve getting them a 4-year degree at UC Irvine, which offers a great degree in global business, right?
It does, but if I may, let me just redirect sort of the comments that you've had, because if you remember the 3 drivers of globalization, mobility of capital, mobility of labor, and the transference of knowledge, and knowledge was the one. And what Paul most certainly highlighted was the need to move within an environment where you're knowledgeable about that networking opportunity. What Meg most certainly did is that she then described the mechanized manner in which that happens and the ability to pivot in order to find what it is, and that requires knowledge. What we'll see now quickly with regards to LinkedIn is the knowledge component with regards to relationships, which is what LinkedIn essentially does as a platform. We would have gotten past that filter if you had had a personal contact that would have been able to personally call Meg and say, take a look at this resume. This is really exceptional. It's not going to get past those filters, so that the personal relationship comes in. But from a knowledge perspective, international work is gray-haired work. You've got to do an incredible amount of experience. It is not like startups where a young dynamic person is able to transact within a very specific environment, but rather it requires a knowledge base that's fundamental to be able to have experience, the knowledge, the wisdom of experience. And when I was your age, and I know that I have a lot of gray hair now, but when I was your age, I had to make the decision in my life, and it happened at one point, which was essentially my junior year in college. And my grandfather said to me, you speak Spanish, but you don't speak it well enough that reflects your intelligence. So he sent me to Spain, and that became the most transformative event of my life, which was essentially what I live my life now in academia. The greatest classroom in the world is a foreign country. For those of you that speak another language, you have to hold true to it, understand it, and get it to a level that reflects your intelligence. The second part is that you need to have also some international experience. So I understand through the conversations I had when I first came on campus that some of you have the opportunity to travel here through a study abroad program. Take advantage of that. With that in mind, then what happens is that when I have the opportunity, when companies such as Paul's or Disney, which has come to me, they come to me and they say, William, we need your best students so that you can tell us who you think would be the best for this job. The first thing I look for my students is, do they speak the language that the client or that the person requires? Number two is do they have international experience? Because that creates a certain global mindset. Once you have that mindset, then it has to go. But from a community college perspective, I would strongly recommend that you continue your education. Perhaps what I'm going to suggest is that there's going to be an opportunity where you're going to be wanting to continue that. An undergraduate degree now is essentially a high school education about the time when I was about your age. Consider staying in school, and then from there, continue looking even further down the road.
Thank you. Thank you, William. Well, Meg, the time has come to finally address you and to talk to you a little bit about LinkedIn and the initiative that we are launching now, which is LinkedIn Learning. But before we do that, I was hoping that since you work in technology, that you could maybe give us a brief on how technology has changed business, global business.
Thanks, Rafael, and thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this panel. I'm really honored to be here. So just on a very simple level, I think, as all of you here are aware, the rapid rise of technology has really evened the playing field and kind of flattened the world out and made it possible for everyone to take part in global trade. So, if you have a LinkedIn profile, an Instagram profile or a Facebook account, you're able to market your personal brand and your ideas to people around the world. If you have an Amazon account, you can buy and sell things to people around the world. So similar to that, LinkedIn is one of those global online players. But what makes LinkedIn really unique is that it enables you to connect with opportunities on a global scale. Or as Professor Hernandez said, it gives you the ability to engage in interpersonal relations on a global scale. So I think that it's becoming a more and more indispensable tool for people who are interested in taking part in global business. And right now, 9 out of 10 recruiters are on LinkedIn. So it's definitely a place where you want to have a presence, and it's becoming increasingly the place where people are going to find new talent for their companies. So I think that in the next 5 to 10 years, that's only going to increase, and that's only going to, become more of a trend. So definitely having a presence online is going to be really important. And then I think there's a second piece of that, which is related to skills. So with the rise of technology, the shelf life of skills is declining. So, whereas you might have learned a skill 20 years ago and it might have served you for your whole career, if you learn a skill now, the shelf life is about 5 years. So it's really, really important to stay on top of learning those new skills and kind of upskilling so that you can continue to evolve as global business evolves. So being a lifelong learner, I think, is going to be something that is increasingly important in the next 5 to 10 years and beyond.
Right. Wow, so 5 years, shelf life, 5 years of any skill.
That's what they say.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. I hadn't heard that. Thank you for sharing that. So let's segue right into the real exciting part, which is why you're here. And that is to introduce us to the LinkedIn Learning Initiative, which GTL brought to us a year ago. And we have been looking to train our instructors, and we are working on that. But I thought I would take this opportunity to share with our students, you can share with them how to get signed up to LinkedIn Learning.
Sure. So LinkedIn Learning, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is an online learning platform where you can learn new skills. And so it's fully integrated with LinkedIn. How many of you have a LinkedIn profile? Awesome. So about half of you. So for those of you who don't, I'm just going to make a quick plug. LinkedIn is a free platform, so there's really no reason not to get signed up. And you can get on there and connect with jobs, connect with other professionals, and share ideas. And LinkedIn Learning is actually fully integrated with LinkedIn. And so you can go online, you can access over 12,000 courses in, I think, 7 languages that cover things like business, entrepreneurship, design, technology, and much more. And you can access all of that through your LinkedIn profile. And so by connecting it to LinkedIn, you're going to get personalized recommendations from LinkedIn with courses that you should watch. And these recommendations are based on who you are, your skills, the industry that you're in, what your peers are watching. And so it's going to be a really tailored learning experience. And normally, LinkedIn Learning is $30 a month. So if you were to just go in and purchase it yourself, you would be paying $30 a month. But because you're a student here, you get it for free. So I would highly encourage you to take advantage of this. We're going to be collecting everyone's email addresses. So I think there's a sign-in sheet going around, and you can write your email address down. And then shortly after this event, we're going to be sending out emails with links to register. So you'll be able to get signed up. So again, I would just highly encourage all of you to take advantage of this. Like I mentioned, the shelf life of skills is decreasing, and so it's so important that you all become lifelong learners. Your education doesn't end when you graduate from college. It doesn't end when you finish your formal education. The world is changing, and so it's so important to continue learning throughout your life and continue to take those skills with you. And one of the things that is really special about LinkedIn Learning is that because it's connected to your LinkedIn account, you can actually take that with you after you graduate from college. So it's all going to be there. All of those certificates that you've earned through our site that you can share on your profile are still going to be there. Your learning history is going to stay. So while you won't have access to the courses for free after you graduate from college here, you'll still be able to retain all that history. And if you decide to, pick it up again after college and purchase your own subscription, you'll be able to pick up where you left off and carry that through your career.
Wow, wonderful. So expect to hear from LinkedIn, everybody. Make sure you sign your name and your email address on the sheets that are going around. Thank you, Meg. Wonderful. So, William, I'd like to revisit and go back to you now and talk about a hot topic, and I don't want to put you on a tough position, but you are the expert, sir, and I must address this question. So, You and I know Peter Navarro. He's a colleague of yours, and like you, he was my instructor of macroeconomics in graduate school 10 years ago. And for those of you that don't know who Peter Navarro is, he is, the title that he bears in the White House is he works in the Office of Trade and Manufacturing Policy. So he advises our president on affairs with regard to trade. Tough job he has, Peter Navarro. And although I have not chatted with him in a while because he now holds a very important position and so on, I wanted to ask you if you could share with us briefly, what is the role that government plays in global business? And a part B, well, I'll let you answer that and I'll ask part B of the question.
So what is the role that government plays in business, global business? A fairly serious role at multiple levels, and I think all of you sort of recognize that implicitly. Perhaps the most important function that it serves is encouraging or detracting from the actual business. Some business will seek, some governments will seek to encourage business, and there's a whole bunch of databases that reflects sort of the economic model necessary to create that business, and then some governments hinder that business. But what I believe the question really asks is, to what extent does government support this concept of global capitalization or global capitalism that I alluded to earlier? And that becomes really the issue at heart, which is global business directly contrary to the concept of domestic business or the concept of national business? And while I don't believe that they actually are, I do to some extent agree with my colleague, Peter Navarro, who has now assumed the position that he is in a position where he's responsible for a lot of the policy associated with international trade, and in particular with trade with China, between the United States and China. I'm really happy that he espouses his position. Academic freedom is part of being able to present and argue a highly contrarian position. We at the School of Business, the vast majority of our faculty does not adhere to his position. And in fact, I can honestly say there are a few economists that actually do support his position. But I am encouraged by the fact that it is taking a position. I want to some extent, while I said that I don't necessarily agree with his position, let me tell you that that is not by any means a blanket statement, because in some cases I have agreed with him, and therein is where we need to be able, as thinking intellectually awake human beings, we need to be able to determine when someone says something that because it comes from that person, you may not necessarily want to listen to. But let me give you just the example. For those of you that may know, the Trump administration, through Peter Navarro's input, chose not to participate in the TPP, which is the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And I don't know how many of you ever got a chance to look at the incredibly complex nature of that proposed a multilateral trade agreement. And in that capacity, they chose not to do it because of national domestic reasoning. I agreed with that decision. I thought that the TPP was not appropriate for the United States, but not necessarily because of the reasoning that Peter Navarro and the Trump administration had espoused, but rather for a whole list of other reasons that really have to do with the secretive nature in which it was negotiated, and then finally the role that multinationals really played in that as a, and this is going to sound crazy, as a usurpation of the traditional concept of sovereignty. So I'm more than happy to share with you some of that, maybe on an aside after this.
Very good. Well, thank you for shedding so much light on that, William. And I'd like to jump back to Paul. And To follow in the steps of the question that I just posed to William, if you can talk to us a little bit about the administration of justice when it comes to trade, these bilateral or trilateral agreements that come about and stick around for a while, and like NAFTA gets negotiated. How do these help an individual who is interested in starting an import or an export business? Maybe one of our students here is interested in knowing that. What do they need to know about this kind of administration of justice?
Sure, thank you. So there are a couple things that I think of, two large categories when I think of administration of justice in the context of international trade. One, as Rafael alluded to, is treaties. So NAFTA, CAFTA, which is a Central American Free Trade Agreement, which was 5 countries added on in Central America to NAFTA, which is now the USMCA, or NAFTA 2, as it's usually called informally. And then the question of how are trade rights, whether it's intellectual property or other assets that a company has, how are they protected internationally? So with respect to the treaties, as William mentioned, obviously government is involved in these treaties, and these treaties are incredibly important for countries because they set the rules by which goods are imported and exported to and from countries. So the tariffs that apply, the taxes, if you will, that are put on products when they come into countries are set by these treaties, or the lack of taxes that are put on them if you meet certain treaty requirements. So for people who are interested in and this applies mainly to goods coming in and out of countries, and to some extent services like tax services or accounting, but largely it's in the context of how literally products come into and out of a country. Understanding those treaties is critical because you need to be able to advise either yourself, if it's your own company and you're importing and exporting, or if you work for a company, to understand how those treaties work, because that governs how products come into or out of your country. And so you need to understand what it's going to cost in terms of those tariffs and those taxes. You also need to understand that there may be ways that instead of bringing a product in from China to the United States, it may be helpful to bring that product first into Ecuador, because China has a treaty with Ecuador, and then Ecuador has a treaty under CAFTA with the United States. But understanding those things puts you at a tremendous advantage to an employer in terms of how attractive you are to us, because you can help us navigate complex things. A lot of people are bored out of their mind with these treaties, and if you read them, you'll shoot yourself in the head. These are not exciting things to read for anybody. I'm a lawyer, and I swallow a shotgun when I read them. But the flip side is, because they are not easy to understand, those people who do understand them are at a tremendous premium. So understanding how goods go between countries and how it costs and what the rules are critical. The other part, the administration of justice, just briefly, is how are things like patents or copyrights or trademarks protected across. So if you sell a product in China or in Europe or in Central America, how can you protect the intellectual property associated with your product? Or if you enter into agreement, just a basic contract with a company in one of those countries, and they breach that, they don't perform, will you be able to go to court and enforce your rights, to protect your rights in those countries? We deal with a lot of countries, and we have these contracts that I am involved in, and I kind of laugh. I say, yeah, the country says that, but whether you can enforce it or not is a huge question. So understanding also what rights your company has in these countries and how they can be protected or how they may not be able to be protected is critical. So when you look at international things, as William suggested, there are various rules that are set, either treaties, laws that exist in a given country, or rules that are set by private agreement between various companies, which are the contracts. So understanding, like any game, life is a game, and understanding any game and playing that game, you have to understand those rules. So those parts of what are loosely called the administration of justice are the rules that set the context within which you participate and and you do business. Right now, people talking a lot about tariffs. I spend probably a third of my day every day for the past month working on what's called tariff mitigation. We buy a lot from China. We have tens of millions of dollars, if not more, at stake because of these tariffs. I spend a lot of my time trying to figure out how to get around tariffs. So these things that you hear on TV that sound boring, again, they are boring, but when you all of a sudden are affecting tens of millions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars of your company, all of a sudden it's not so boring because it's real money. So these things are all very important, and there are tremendous opportunities for people who understand those areas of international trade to be very valuable to companies. And again, in terms of making yourself competitive and attractive, understanding those things would certainly increase your attractiveness.
Very good. Well, thank you for sharing that. And for our students, if you are interested in learning more about global business and bilateral treaties and most of the stuff that William and Paul shared with us today, we have a class, I believe it's BizAd 166, Global Business. And it's a wonderful class that I've had the pleasure of teaching in the past, and I encourage you all to consider it.
You should. You need to understand the rules. You should. It's not a shameless plug for Rafael's, because he's not paying me as much as LinkedIn, so I don't plug him the same. But the rules do matter.
Yes, thank you for that. And also, just a quick parenthesis. For those of you that are interested in having a profile on LinkedIn and don't know how to do it, we offer a class called Written Business Communications 106, BizAd 106. And I suggest you look at that class also if you want to learn more about LinkedIn. So we're coming up to the Q&A part of the discussion and approaching our end. But before we do, I have a question for Ariella. And I thought we would close on that because she works with Disney, and we all love Disney, and we all grew up with it. And personally, I'm very interested in this cultural exploration of content making. And with the Black Panther film coming out and being the top grossing movie that I'm sure we all we've seen, I saw it on 3D, wondering if you could just take us home with this idea that the globe is changing and entertainment companies are now beginning to look at content that is more significant to all of us.
I mean, definitely it's evolved in the past 20 years since I've been in the industry, but do we have any Black Panther fans out here? Any Black Panther fans?
Yep.
Black Panther, it surpassed a $1 billion box office, but only half of that was done in the US. So as media companies, as content creators, we have to be concerned with the globalization of entertainment content. The other half, which was approximately $700 million, was our foreign box office, which is a big number to be contributing to a movie studio's bottom line. And a little fun fact, almost a fifth of that was done in China. Wow. So over $100 million was the revenue from Black Panther in China. And if you aren't aware, China, and this just sparked my interest because of the role of government in, in China, the government completely regulates the film industry and only allows about 34 international, so, from the United States, but other countries, only 34 foreign films into the country per year. So you can imagine, even in the United States, we have many, many, many more than 34 films per year that all of the movie studios are pushing out. But the government gets to decide in China which 34 they are going to distribute and allow the distribution of. So that is a huge area of opportunity for entertainment companies to really be, involved in, negotiating what those films are going to be. And it's big business, as you can see, over $100 million just for one film in China last year. So it's very interesting because this is all, China used to allow even less. So now it's more, but there's more, films being pushed out. So there's more competition, and there's negotiators and a lot of people that are involved with the Chinese government when it comes to distribution of that content. And then it's funny, people think I come from Anaheim, but no, we're actually headquartered here in Burbank. And I actually work for the Disney channels worldwide. So I always get asked questions about the movie studio, which I personally find fascinating, and I Google it like most of you guys do. But even on the Disney Channel side, we're doing business in 155 countries. Disney Channel has a feed in 155 countries. So when I came on board, I was like, this is a U.S. channel. But that is not necessarily the case when I was brought on board to manage the franchises, which really was, how do we make more money for these big brands? It was really looking at the international opportunities. We have over 33 other channels in other markets, and we're focused on one a lot of the times. So that's another way that business is sort of, evaluating what other opportunities are out there, and where, again, I didn't necessarily go to school for this, but I quickly had to pivot and be flexible to now sort of analyzing different territories and different markets for business and revenue opportunities. The only Disney Channel franchises to ever hit over $1 billion in revenue were the ones that succeeded in other countries. So the High School Musicals and the Hannah Montanas and the Mickey Clubhouses, the ones that are more domestic based, they really don't drive the big numbers for the company.
Right. Yeah, so I recall my days at Viacom, and I would go hang out at the lot at Paramount, and I would talk to the executives and say, if we're collecting more revenue from abroad than we are domestically, doesn't it just make sense to be more culturally sensitive about the content? So personally, I am elated to see that this is happening.
Yeah, and look at the movies that are doing the best. Coco. We have Aladdin coming out. So this is definitely, I just had I was participated in a panel, because again, constant learners, even as the executives, we go through these panels, and I had the pleasure of listening to Julianne Cromit, who was brought on to Disney to oversee multicultural integration on the film studio side, and had done extensive studies ahead of Coco, ahead of Aladdin, ahead of some of these films that Black Panther, even, that really the movies that are doing the best for us, obviously not only domestically but internationally, are the ones with these multicultural sensitivities. And Disney's a machine, so of course they have lots of consultants to make sure that we get it right.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Thank you. Well, at this point, I'd like to pass a microphone around and ask questions of our audience. Do we have microphones? Do we borrow one from up here?
How beneficial do you think it is to try and learn as much as you can of a language? And I'm asking because I might have some stuff happening where I have to go and interface with them, and I suck at learning languages. And so for me, it would just take a lot of time to try and get to a point where I can have a conversation. How much does that matter?
So there are probably two answers to that. One is it always matters and is always helpful. I mean, the language is still a critical thing in terms of your ability to obviously communicate, but just to get close to someone and actually get to know them, the language is a tremendous benefit. And generally understanding the culture and being part of the culture is much easier if you understand the language. So there's no question it's helpful. Now, there is also a reality that if you're going over, like I go to the Philippines, I go to China, I go to other places, so I obviously don't speak any of those languages, but I couldn't just learn Chinese and then pick up, Filipino, Tagalog. So if you have the language, and as William mentioned, for those of you who have some language ability already based on where you were born or any other reason, and you can perfect that and strengthen that, it is critical. The flip side of that is that English is clearly the universal business language. And when Europeans come to Asia or Europeans go to Latin America, business is conducted largely in English, unless, obviously Spain and Latin America, that doesn't count. But so if you speak English, you still can conduct business, and it is still very important to go develop those relationships even if you don't have the language. So I developed very good relationships with people in our Asian facilities, even though I don't speak any Asian language, and that presence and that effort is still worth a tremendous amount. So you can be fine, you can do well, you can operate at a high level because English has become fairly universal. That being said, if you have the ability to learn a language even somewhat, to communicate even in broken language, that is tremendously helpful.
It shows that's kind of what I was asking.
Absolutely.
Did the respect thing, it matters that you're trying a lot?
I have bad Spanglish. I have decent French and bad Spanglish, but and William will tell you. But it does help some even to be able to have conversations a little bit at a hotel with the taxi driver or with a worker if you're in a factory. Just to be able to have some basic conversation is very helpful. But don't not do international business because you don't speak other languages. Don't say, well, I don't speak 2 other languages, and then self-censor yourself out of it. That would be a mistake.
If I can add to that just real quickly, your point is extremely well taken in the sense that what you have to understand is how to manipulate and work within your behavior, manipulate your behavior within a culture. And what you have to do is learn how cultures think. And yes, language is the best way, but what you'll notice is that as you work more internationally, and if you take certain courses that specialize in culture, then what happens is that you're going to be in a position to understand what we call high context, low context, concepts of polychronic time, concepts of power distance, concepts of individualism versus collectivism, and then you rate cultures through this, so that all of a sudden what happens is that you learn the universal cultural traits and how those apply to a specific culture, so that then you're able to control your behavior even though you may not have that linguistical skill.
Many of our panel members emphasize the interpersonal nature of business. As job seekers, what are some interpersonal skills that we should work on? What interpersonal skills are going to help us succeed in this highly social environment?
Okay, so if you'll allow me, please, there's a series of protocols that we manipulate in our international management classes, in our global marketing classes, and we call those internationalists' traits. What are the characteristics that make for a good internationalist? And those fluctuate and they vary, but to give you an idea, it's the concept of curiosity, curiosity with regards to culture, curiosity with regards to another person, concepts of flexibility, concepts of acculturation, concepts of assertiveness, concepts of that has to do with your level of competitiveness, your overall attitude. Literally, and I almost feel like I'm on a quiz right here, because that's what I would do to my class, right? What are the characteristics of an internationalist? And those are the attributes that you would say. But having said that, what that implies is that there are some people that should not do international work, simply because there's some proclivity to them not being able or willing to do these mental adjustments. But notice, and I know that time is limited, and there's sort of a negation of the self in doing that, right? To truly do international work, and although Paul doesn't show you that, Paul actually is bicultural. Paul comes from a Polish background, and so he actually already understands the little. And some of you that are bicultural or tricultural, you understand that little click that we have to do in order just to be able to adapt. When you begin to hone that skill is then when you're able to acquire that type of true perspective that creates what we call a global mindset.
My answer is probably a little less academic and a little more practical, but I cannot stress the importance and value of networking. And sometimes it's not natural to everybody. Sometimes it's, you begrudgingly, oh my gosh, I have to go meet people. I have to talk to people I don't know. Sometimes it's not fun, depending on your personality, but it is so critical, and it has actually led me to almost every single professional job that I've had. And it can come in a variety of different forms: semi-professional groups, student groups, meetup groups. There's, again, the advancement of technology has made it so easy to sort of seek out these like-minded individuals that have meetup sessions or professional mixers in downtown or wherever it may be. But getting out there in person, that is really, and even if you don't, it doesn't necessarily lead to your next job. The more you do it, the more comfortable you get, the more people you meet, the more backgrounds you start to understand. So you're only going to be a better, business citizen the more you do this, meeting people and honing those interpersonal skills.
And just to add on to that really quickly, one of the things that I've learned since working at LinkedIn is that 85% of jobs are filled through employee referrals. So it's more important than ever, to have connections and to build out a a professional network. And so one of the ways you can do that is by having a LinkedIn profile and starting to connect with people that you know while you're a student. So that can be classmates, that can be people in clubs and groups that you're involved in on campus. It can be friends. You never know who might be able to connect you with an opportunity in the future. So it's a good idea to just start building that network now.
Is it easy for you guys to have cultural communication to make a successful business?
So from my personal experience at LinkedIn, we have offices all over the globe. So we do have offices in, the Asia Pacific region. We have offices in our Europe and we call it EMEA, but Europe and Middle East and Africa regions. And so we have presence all over the world. I would say that because of technology, it's pretty easy to connect with those offices and those people. And I think that it does kind of, like I said, sort of flatten the playing field and make it easy for everybody to participate. But that, I can't necessarily speak from having experience traveling to those countries and being part of, the global business in that sense, because I'm based in California and don't travel internationally.
One thing William mentioned, and I'll give you a more direct answer in 1 second, about understanding the culture and all that. It sounds just obvious, but it's not. Americans generally are bad foreign travelers. We're loud, we're egocentric, we think we're right, we expect things to happen immediately. So we're generally international idiots, is my, and the ugly American thing is not just a tourist thing, but is somewhat true in my experience. Obviously, generalization, simplification, but not untrue that I find us to be somewhat international idiots. But understanding the culture when you go somewhere, and also remember when you go as an American, you come with good baggage and you come with bad baggage. You come with baggage, there's a presumption that you probably are competent, and there's a presumption that you may be a jerk. So you come with good and bad baggage. So I worked for a Japanese company. Dealing with the Japanese is markedly different than dealing with the Germans or dealing with Americans. Dealing with Latin America, again, not to make that one monolith but generally culturally, dealing with Latin America is very different than dealing with any of those. So you do need to understand, like if you go into Japanese negotiation, and William has written on this, so he's far more astute about this than I, but if you go into that and you are kind of a very forceful, this needs to be done, shut down, negotiation over, you have failed. So you do need to understand that. And you do need to change. And one of the other interpersonal skills is if you're interviewing for a Japanese company and you talk about how you are an individual, how you have all this drive, and how you're going to get things done on your own because you're a go-getter, that may not work well with that company, but with a German company or an American company, it may work better. But just quickly on your thing, going abroad. So you can work successfully abroad as an American. Obviously, if you have the language, much easier. If you don't have the language, you can still do it, but I'll give you an example. We have a white American guy who only speaks English who runs our 2,600 person facility in Subic Bay, Philippines, which is almost all Filipino workers. So he's got some language issues, but English is prevalent in the Philippines. But we have had, it was a cultural adjustment for him to understand, and he wasn't a guy who was culturally that astute to begin with, to be honest. He's a good guy, but not that astute. So you can do it, but you do need to learn, especially if you're going to manage, you do need, as William said, to understand people's perception of time, people's perception of initiative, and people will often, in other cultures, they may do what you've asked them to do, but may not do much more because that wasn't clear to them that was part of their job. So you absolutely can do it, but I cannot stress enough how you have to be sensitive to the culture. And then they'll get that, they know you don't speak Tagalog. I mean, they get it. You're some guy, not that many people out of the Philippines do. That's okay. But what's not okay is for you to be a jerk who has no understanding or sensitivity to their cultural reality.
Professor, what do you think? What be next step in the global economy, and your forecasting? What do you think about future of global economy?
Do you want me to be honest, or do you want me to be
100% honest? Because it's the one thing we have.
So this is a very careful question, and I have to be conscious because if this is being taped, it can create issues. So let me present something. The concept of of the nation state is changing. If I'm interpreting your question correctly, we associate with a nation. We believe we are from a nation perspective, but what I've alluded to is globalization takes you out of that construct. You can work in a nation, but you begin to think differently, and that's a very different mindset. This is where I have to be careful what I'm about to say. I believe that global economy is creating a situation where the nation state is going to be diminished. We're going to find ourselves more and more in what we call supranational entities. NAFTA, CAFTA, European Union, Mercosur are supranational entities where all of a sudden we're able to do something. The case in point, and I know I'm limited, is please understand something, that to the extent that you are your nation, your currency, your national currency becomes your identifier. And think about this, when Greece, which had the oldest currency in the world, the drachma, chose to give up that currency in order to participate in a larger supranational level. And for those of you that have followed, the Greek tragedy and the way it's manifested itself, all Greece had to do, if it still had its currency, was devalue the currency, and it would have been just fine. But because it was now part of the euro, it can't do that. What we're seeing then in turn is if it went to that supranational is now coming into play with the concept of these global corporations, where, I don't know if you know, Apple and Alibaba out of China are now trillion-dollar companies. If you look at the ranking and the GDP of most nations on earth, that's among the top 16 in the world, right? So the concept of economic power, the concept of who we are may very well change. Hi, I'm not an American anymore. I'm now a Google, or I'm an Apple. Or you now begin to associate an organizational culture, as this man starts to do, where all of a sudden you're starting to change. And that's where it gets a little bit tricky. And I know for some of you, that's really probably very problematic to start thinking in that way. But for those of us that work and live and teach this on a day-to-day basis, it creates some very interesting conceptualizations, because to the extent of who you are is linked to this concept of the boundaries, of the limitations, then it presents some potentially very, very serious problems to your concept of the self.
What industries, or what kind of trades or skills in general do you see becoming more relevant?
Obviously, things related to computers and apps and all that. Gaming is becoming huge. Those will continue to be important. Manufacturing will continue to be important, but will employ fewer laborers. You're right about the financial sector. You're starting to, obviously from Bitcoin on to other types of currencies, how that affects the market, how that even affects contracts. The artificial intelligence is taking over a lot of things, even in the legal industry. Fortunately, I'm old enough that I think I'll be out of it before they take my job, but it is becoming an issue. One thing I'll say that's probably not maybe as obvious is that the soft skills of communication, of writing, of critical thinking are still very important. In a side job, I'm an elected school board member down in Irvine. So we've got about 35,000 students. So we frequently talk with people like Google, Amazon, other employers to see what are they looking for. And Google, for instance, hires a lot of art history majors. Not because they need them for the visual, but art history majors see the world and think in a different way. So obviously Google will hire people who can code and do all that, blah, blah, blah. But what might not be as obvious to you is that the ability to think critically, to communicate well, are still critical skills. Those will not be automated, at least even probably in your lifetime. So there are industries that are going away. I would not become a coal miner in America. That would probably not be my first choice. And there are some of those other skills that are critical, but do not overlook the fact that those soft skills are still absolutely critical.
I'd like to thank you all for coming. And to thank our speakers today for taking the time for being here. I know I learned a lot from each of you today, and I'm so grateful for your presence here. And to our students as well, we'll be back here again in May. I'm still perusing the topic, whether it's me or a fellow colleague who will host the show, I thank you for being here today. Have a great day.